Hello and welcome to this 61st episode of Questioning Woke Psychotherapy. My name is Michael Dwan Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and a life coach in private practice in London. In this video, we're going to consider a range of questions about hate speech and free speech. I've done some research on the topic and formulated my own opinions, which I intended to share with you, but I've changed my mind and decided to approach the topic in a completely different way. I'm going to pose the questions to you that I asked myself and invite you to really think about them. I suppose it's just the good old Socratic method. My questions are not meant to make a point in a merely rhetorical way. They're meant to get you thinking. The nature of my questions will expose the nature of my own opinions, but I will leave these mostly left unsaid. I imagine that my questions might lead you to think similarly to me, but maybe not. Please feel free to think yourself in whatever direction makes sense to you and arrive wherever you arrive. I encourage you to question any axiomatic presuppositions or unexamined assumptions lurking in my questions. Sometimes I'll question them myself. Whatever view you arrive at, I ask, can you justify it? Have you thought through the likely consequences if everyone believed and acted from that place? Would that be good? Might there be a cost? Yeah. I'm already pretending to be Socrates. Maybe my opinions are wrong and I could be persuaded to think differently. Maybe you'll leave a comment to set me on the right path. I'm not going to elucidate the details of hate speech and free speech laws in the US, UK, Canada, or elsewhere, nor am I going to provide examples of how they've been applied recently in real cases. If you're following the news, you'll be aware of this yourself. It is all very fascinating and alarming to me, but I'm not going to get into that for now. Instead, I want to see if I can invite and provoke you to think on a deep level about the topic. I believe that this will ground us in what is most important and understand what's at stake. This ought to precede any reaction we have to current events. Because it will pose many questions, each one worthy of considerable reflection, I suggest you begin by just listening and taking them in. Pausing between questions to give you time to think would take way too long, and it wouldn't be enough time anyway. You can listen to the video again later and pause it to consider each question. I'll also include a transcript of the video with just the questions in the description so that you can read them at your leisure. Or maybe just a few of these questions will stick in your mind and you can mull them over while you're walking your dog, driving to work, or sitting in your garden enjoying some downtime. Okay, here come the questions. What is hate? What provokes hate? Have you ever hated anyone or anything? Is hate ever a useful emotion? What potential harm can be done when speech and or action are motivated by hate? Can hate ever be eliminated in individuals and society? How might this be accomplished? More specifically, what is hate speech? Do you know how the law defines hate speech where you live? Do you agree with that definition? Have you ever feared you might be accused of it? A typical definition of hate speech associates it with causing harm to a protected group. What do you think is meant by harm? What do you think it should mean? Official definitions of hate speech refer to offense that is experienced as distressing to others. Do you believe this is sufficient to consider something hate speech? Should that justify prosecution under the law? Should the degree of harm be measured by the degree of distress subjectively felt and reported by those claiming to be offended? Should there be any burden of proof on the alleged victim to substantiate claims of distress? Should a subjective claim of distress be valid criteria for determining prosecution and the severity of the restitution or sentence? Should hate speech be legally confined to only protected characteristics such as race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, and transgender identity? If so, why should we care more about harm and distress caused to these social groups than harm and distress caused by hatred toward individuals belonging to other groups or for other reasons? Does it ever happen that individuals in these protected groups feel offended by speech or expression and assume it is because the offender is targeting their membership in one of these groups, even when nothing has been explicitly expressed about their group membership? Should the law defer to the alleged victim's perception of and presuppose the intention of the offender accordingly? Why? Or why not? To what degree is it fair and reasonable to expect some degree of emotional resilience on the part of those claiming to be offended and distressed? If this is not expected, how likely is it that those claiming offense will exaggerate their distress for potential benefits and advantages? Is it or should it be considered hate speech to challenge or criticize ideological truth claims made by those in a protected group? Given that religious affiliation is a protected characteristic, is it a hate crime to criticize or even mock religious beliefs? If so, is that not in the realm of blasphemy law? And are blasphemy laws a good idea? And why or why not? Let's add a few of these things together and ask about their cumulative effect. What would be the consequences of 1, defining hate speech as anything that causes or even might cause offense and distress to a protected group? 2, measuring that harm by the subjective report of the offended? 3, presupposing a malevolent intent of the alleged offender regardless of their stated intent? 4, treat criticism of the beliefs of the offended as hate speech, i.e. trans women are men, and 5, mete out prison sentences for offenders convicted by such a process. Would you like to live in such a world? If you're liking this video so far, please remember to give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Every additional subscriber gives me a little dopamine hit, makes me feel good. And it's greatly appreciated. Thanks. Moving on. How does it make sense to prosecute someone for hate speech based on the possibility that their speech or expression might cause someone else to commit a crime? By that logic, would we not prosecute filmmakers who make films about bank heists? Think about it. We're willing to prosecute someone because of something that someone else might do as a consequence of what they have said. I'm not talking about explicit incitements to violence. That seems clear. But beyond that, how do we determine a sufficient threshold of certainty about such speculations, such that it warrants a significant prison sentence? And even if there are those who subsequently break the law, should there need to be any proof that the offender's comments were causative? If it is merely conceivable, is that enough? Shifting gears. Is there any reason to believe that there won't or shouldn't be any more inclusions on the list of protected groups? Why not short people, ugly people, childless women, introverts, vegans, alopecia sufferers, the dentally challenged, redheads? And why should religion be more protected than political persuasion? People who can claim membership in any of these other groups can be subject to offense and emotional distress if denigrated because of their membership. Why is it not hate speech to refer to an entire demographic as a basket of deplorables? Why should distress experienced by other groups matter any less? Why have we sacralized only a select few of the countless number of possible identity groups that can be targeted by hate speech? And while I'm at it, what about hate speech aimed at white people and men? Is that okay? Why? Why not? Aren't these subsets of the protected characteristics of race and sex? Should hate speech aimed at Christians be just as illegal as so-called Islamophobia? It's a religion, right? All right, enough questions about hate speech for now. What about free speech? Here are a few questions for you to ponder. Is it important to protect free speech and free expression? Why? No, really, why? What happens if we don't have it? Should it be unlimited, or are there restrictions you believe should apply? Almost everyone agrees that incitements to violence should not be allowed. But beyond this, should restrictions be carefully kept to a minimum? Or in service to protecting certain groups from harm based on a subjective report of distress, should we elaborate further restrictions? If you believe this, where would you draw the line? What should be included beyond incitement to violence as a reason to constrain free speech? When do we cross a line into totalitarian state? And is a totalitarian state a bad thing if it ensures that no one will ever be offended? Would the society thereby created be a utopia or a dystopia? Would never being offended facilitate or obstruct personal development? For that matter, is personal development important? If offending each other is perceived as equivalent to hate speech and results in a moral and legal imperative that seriously constrains speech, how are we to debate our shared problems from different and competing perspectives and arrive at effective solutions? If one is aligned with a political party currently in power and one is in favor of that party's speech constrictions on competing political parties, how can one be certain that one's own free speech will be protected when the other party gains power? Okay, so maybe this is more of a rhetorical question. The answer is one can't be certain. I love coming up with questions and could carry on indefinitely, but maybe this is plenty to think about for now. I invite you to not only reflect on these questions abstractly in terms of your own moral reasoning, but consider the real world around you and what is going on. What laws apply in your region? Who is being arrested for what? What impact have hate speech laws had on people's sense of safety in speaking up about things they are unhappy or care about, including yourself? Do you think Elon Musk should be put in prison? Are you horrified by that possibility? Or do you think it's necessary? I've purposely restricted my own opining in this video so that you can have a chance to think for yourself. I'll say, however, if it isn't clear already, that I fear that our freedom of speech is in danger of being lost. I think it's important to see exactly how it's being eroded little by little, justified by the idea that we need protection from horrible harms. We need to protect our freedom of speech, stand up and make arguments for it, and refuse to be silenced. In addition to concerns about hate speech, which translate into constraints on free speech, there's also the idea of misinformation. This is thought to cause harm as well, albeit in a different way, and has also led to constraints on free speech. Perhaps I'll address this in a future video. Let me know if that would interest you. Well, that's all for now. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Do not intend harm, but let others take responsibility for the distress if they are offended by the truth, even if that truth happens to be nothing more than the truth of what you think and feel. Bye for now.